A biting winter wind whipped through the city, and a small, pink-jacketed figure, a 7-year-old girl, collapsed in the pristine snowdrifts outside the formidable gates of a billionaire's estate. With a strength born of pure desperation, she managed to lift her gaze to the imposing structure and utter 7 whispered words, fragile as ice, that would ultimately shatter the meticulously constructed world of its reclusive owner. Sir, my mama didn't come home last night. The subsequent search, sparked by her innocent plea, would unearth a devastating truth, laying bare a systemic blindness he had unknowingly harbored his entire life. And what transpired in the days and weeks that followed, an indelible tapestry of change, weaving together 3 disparate lives forever. This is the heart-wrenching tale of a child's impossible journey through a merciless blizzard, a mother's unwavering sacrifice, and a man who possessed every material comfort yet lacked the one thing that truly mattered. Bear with me, for by the story's poignant conclusion, you will understand how one frigid, forgotten morning blossomed into the warmest, most life-affirming moment any of them had ever known. Welcome, dear friends, to the voice of Granny. As you settle in, please consider tapping that subscribe button and sharing your thoughts on the story, along with where you're listening from. Your connection means the world. Allow me to transport you back to that fateful morning, one that irrevocably altered the destinies of 3 souls. It was the kind of bone-chilling winter day that whispered promises of warmth and cocoa, urging everyone to retreat indoors, to the sanctuary of blankets and hearths, far removed from the world's harsh embrace. But for many, such a choice remained an unattainable luxury. In the bustling, often rain-slicked streets of Seattle, a city accustomed to perpetual drizzle but rarely visited by significant snowfall, an unyielding blizzard had descended overnight. The metropolis, utterly unprepared for such a ferocious onslaught, ground to a halt. Buses, once the city's lifeblood, stood motionless. Cars, once symbols of autonomy, spun helplessly on treacherous, ice-sheathed roads. And amidst this unexpected urban chaos, a tiny girl walked, utterly and terrifyingly alone. Her name was Lily, just 7 years old. Her slight frame was swallowed by a hand-me-down pink jacket, once vibrant, now softened and faded by countless washes, a testament to its enduring use. Her small, worn boots offered little defense against the elements. Gaping holes greedily swallowed the snow with every agonizing step, sending icy tendrils of cold creeping up her small legs. Her hands, tiny and fragile, were alarmingly red, almost raw, from the biting chill, and each breath she exhaled emerged as a fleeting cloud, instantly consumed by the frigid, unforgiving air. Lily had been walking since the first faint blush of dawn, her wide, desperate eyes ceaselessly scanning every snow-choked corner, every desolate street, every bundled face she passed. She was searching, with an ache that resonated deep within her young heart, for one person, her mother. Lily's mother, Grace, was an invisible pillar of the city's burgeoning tech empire, working as a cleaner at one of the sprawling corporate campuses on the city's outskirts. Her shift began as the sun dipped below the horizon, cleaning cavernous offices and silent cubicles while the rest of the world slept soundly. No matter how utterly exhausted Grace was, how heavy her eyelids, she always, without fail, made it home before Lily's eyes fluttered open. Always. She would slip quietly into their cramped, 2-room apartment, press a soft kiss to Lily's forehead, and whisper the comforting words, "Mama's home, baby." But last night the ritual was broken. Lily had woken not to the comforting aroma of brewing coffee, nor the gentle hum of her mother's voice in the kitchen, but to an echoing silence, a cold, vast emptiness, and a fear that gripped her small chest. So, she pulled on her faded jacket, clutched her tiny backpack with her beloved stuffed rabbit, tucked safely inside, and ventured out into the blinding white world to find her. Her first desperate pilgrimage led her to the bus stop where her mother typically disembarked. Nothing, only undisturbed snowdrifts and the ghostly silence of halted public transport. Then, summoning courage she didn't know she possessed, she attempted to walk towards her mother's workplace, a distant behemoth of glass and steel. But the journey proved impossible. The distance was daunting, and the snow, thick and unrelenting, swallowed her small legs with every step. Then, a memory, soft and warm, flickered through her mind. Her mother's words during a terrifying thunderstorm, a promise whispered to calm a frightened child. "If you ever need help, baby, find someone kind, or go to the big building on the hill. The man who lives there, he helps people." Lily had never been to that fabled place, didn't even know the man's name, but she knew the building. Everyone in Seattle did. It crowned the summit of Queen and Hill, an architectural marvel surrounded by imposing iron gates and ancient, snow-laden trees. Locals affectionately called it the glass house, because its myriad windows sparkled like scattered diamonds under the weakest light. Bolstered by this fragile hope, Lily turned, her small body trembling, and began the arduous ascent up the treacherous hill. Her tiny legs screamed in protest, a burning ache spreading through her muscles. Her lungs, raw from the frigid air, seized with each labored breath. The wind, a furious, invisible hand, pushed against her relentlessly, as if determined to forbid her passage, to turn her back. Yet, with a stubbornness that belied her years, she pressed on, each step a testament to a child's unwavering love. When she finally stumbled to a halt before the monumental gates, she felt a profound weariness settle deep in her bones. They stood impossibly tall, glinting like polished obsidian, an unbreachable barrier. Her gaze drifted upwards to a small, watchful camera mounted on a post, and a flicker of hope. Could someone see her? She desperately wanted to press the call button, to summon help, but her fingers, frozen rigid and utterly numb, refused to obey her will. The wind, a mournful banshee, howled its bitter song, swirling thick clouds of snow around her diminishing form. And then, without warning, Lily's legs buckled. She crumpled to the ground, her small backpack sliding from her shoulder, her world tilting precariously, dissolving into a hazy blur of white and gray. Then, piercing through the swirling chaos, a voice, deep, urgent, commandingly clear. "Hey, someone's out there." Instantly, with a low mechanical buzz, the colossal gates swung inward, revealing a path. A man, a dark silhouette against the snowy landscape, sprinted towards her, his long coat billowing dramatically behind him. He dropped to his knees in the treacherous snow, his strong arms sweeping her up just before she could fully succumb to the cold, to oblivion. "I've got you," he affirmed, his voice resonating with a surprising tenderness as he swiftly unwrapped his own coat and enveloped her tiny, shivering body within its folds. "You're safe now." His name was Daniel Rivers. At 41, he was widely regarded as one of the most successful and formidable tech entrepreneurs in the entire Pacific Northwest. He was the visionary founder and CEO of a groundbreaking company that designed life-saving software for hospitals, empowering doctors to make critical decisions and, quite literally, save lives. People in his world lauded him as brilliant, relentlessly driven, and utterly untouchable, a titan of industry. But in that singular moment, cradling this freezing, fragile child in his arms, the complex algorithms of business, the intricate machinations of the market, vanished from his mind. All he could register was the astonishing lightness of her small body, the alarming coldness of her skin, and an overwhelming visceral sense of how profoundly, utterly wrong it was that a little girl could ever find herself alone and lost in such a brutal snowstorm. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice softer than he realized, as he carefully carried her through the grand entrance of his mansion. Lily's lips trembled violently, the effort of speaking almost too great. She whispered so softly, so faintly, that Daniel barely caught the words. "Lily, my mama didn't come home last night." A sharp, sudden pain clenched Daniel's heart, a sensation utterly unfamiliar. Bursting through the mansion doors, he barked urgent commands to his startled staff, his voice echoing with an uncharacteristic edge of panic. "Get the heater on. Bring every blanket you can find. Call a doctor immediately." Inside, the house was a haven of warmth. A majestic fire roared and danced in the colossal stone fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the opulent room. Daniel gently laid Lily onto a plush, oversized couch, tenderly tucking thick, luxurious blankets around her small form. Her tiny fingers, still stiff with cold, instinctively clutched her faithful stuffed rabbit. Moments later, a housekeeper appeared, bearing a steaming mug of hot chocolate, its rich aroma filling the air. Daniel knelt beside Lily, carefully holding the warm cup steady as she took small, hesitant sips, her eyes, though still heavy with exhaustion, flickering with a faint spark of life. "Can you tell me your mama's name, sweet pea?" he asked, his tone impossibly gentle. "Grace," Lily whispered, her voice a mere thread. "Grace Bennett. And where does she work, Lily?" Daniel prompted softly. "At the big place with computers. She cleans the floors at night. She always comes home. Always." Lily's voice cracked with a fragile, heartbreaking tremor. "But she didn't. Did I do something wrong, sir?" Daniel shook his head, a swift, emphatic movement. No, Lily. You didn't do anything wrong. You did everything right. You were incredibly brave to come here." He pulled out his phone, his jaw tightening with a newfound resolve, and began making rapid calls. Within minutes, his assistant was on the line, her voice a distant, efficient hum. "I need you to immediately search our employee records," Daniel commanded, his voice now firm, authoritative. "Grace Bennett, night shift cleaning services. Find out where she is, now." There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on the other end, a moment stretched taut with unspoken tension. Then, his assistant's voice returned, tinged with an unfamiliar uncertainty. "Sir, she's listed as staff for the Cascade campus, but there's no record of her clocking out last night." Daniel's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. His company, like many in the tech world, contracted out its cleaning services. He'd signed off on the budgets, seen the line items, but had never once truly thought about the individuals who performed that labor. To him, they had been utterly invisible, mere nameless cogs in the vast machinery, faceless figures represented by a fluctuating line in a quarterly budget report. Asterisk not anymore. Asterisk get the car ready. Daniel commanded, his voice cutting through the warmth of the room, firm and unyielding. "We're going to find her." He looked down at Lily, whose small body was finally beginning to warm, her eyelids drooping heavily with the crushing weight of exhaustion. "You're coming with me," he said gently, reaching out a hand. "Let's go find your mama." And in that precise moment, something profound shifted, a seismic tremor deep within Daniel's carefully constructed world. This was no longer just a simple act of rescue. It was the nascent, unpredictable beginning of something neither of them could possibly have imagined, a journey into unfamiliar territory for them both. The drive through the blizzard-choked streets felt utterly surreal, a dreamscape painted in stark white and gray, or perhaps, a waking nightmare. Daniel sat in the luxurious leather interior of his sleek black SUV, the powerful engine a muted purr against the storm's fury. Beside him, a tiny bundle swallowed by a blanket that was far too large, sat Lily. She clutched her worn stuffed rabbit close to her chest, her gaze fixed on the passing world, a blurry canvas of swirling snow. "We're going to find her," Daniel said, the words as much a desperate affirmation to himself as they were a reassurance to the child. Lily looked up at him, her huge, tired eyes searching his face. "Promise?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Daniel's heart ached. God, he wanted to promise her, to offer that absolute certainty. But he had learned long ago, through bitter experience, never to make promises he wasn't absolutely sure he could keep. So instead, he chose honesty, tempered with unwavering resolve. "I'm going to try my hardest, Lily, my very hardest." That seemed to be enough for her. She nodded faintly, a fragile sign of trust, and leaned her small head against the plush seat, finally surrendering to the exhaustion. Daniel's mind, usually a whirlwind of strategic calculations and market forecasts, raced with a different kind of urgency. Grace Bennett, a woman he had never met, whose name he hadn't known an hour ago, a woman who worked within the very walls of his empire, who meticulously cleaned his offices, who ensured every surface gleamed spotless before his privileged employees arrived each morning. How many others like her existed in the periphery of his world? How many souls did he pass every single day, their lives interwoven with his own, yet remain utterly unseen? As the SUV finally pulled up to the imposing Cascade campus, Daniel's chest tightened with an unfamiliar constriction. The building loomed, a colossal testament to ambition, all gleaming glass and stark steel, sparkling even beneath the oppressive gray winter light. It was an impressive, successful structure, a monument to his accomplishments. But now, in the face of Lily's silent presence, it felt cold, profoundly impersonal, and starkly alien. His assistant, bundled against the biting wind, met them at the grand entrance, her expression a mix of concern and professional deference. "Sir, I've located the night shift supervisor. He's waiting inside." Daniel took Lily's small hand in his. It felt impossibly fragile, lost within his grasp. "Stay close to me, okay, Lily?" he murmured, and she nodded, her eyes wide. Inside, the building was a hive of activity, a buzzing symphony of purposeful movement. Employees, oblivious to the drama unfolding, moved swiftly through the sleek corridors, fingers flying across laptop keyboards, voices low on phone calls. No one paused, no one spared a second glance for the CEO, a figure usually commanding attention, now walking with a solemn child in tow. They were all far too engrossed in their own busy, self-important orbits. The night shift supervisor, a nervous man with rapidly thinning hair, clutched a clipboard to his chest like a shield. "Mr. Rivers, I wasn't expecting—" "Where's Grace Bennett?" Daniel interrupted, his voice clipped, leaving no room for pleasantries. I don't know, sir. She clocked in last night, but you don't know where she is now." Daniel finished, the unspoken accusation hanging heavy in the air. The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around. "We have a lot of cleaning staff, sir. It's hard to keep track of everyone." A surge of hot anger flared in Daniel's chest, sharp and unexpected, but he ruthlessly suppressed it. Anger would not help Grace. Show me where she was working last night, he commanded, his voice dangerously low. They moved through the labyrinthine building, past rows of empty, silent offices and deserted conference rooms, the very spaces Grace would have been cleaning just hours before. Finally, they reached a secluded hallway near the rear of the sprawling complex. At its very end was a small, unassuming door, marked simply, staff only. Daniel pushed the door open, the sound echoing in the stillness, and there she was. Grace Bennett lay curled on the cold, hard floor beside a row of metal lockers, a tableau of utter desolation. Her cleaning uniform, usually immaculate, was soaked with sweat, clinging to her pale, almost ghostly face. She was utterly still, terrifyingly motionless. "Mama!" Lily screamed, a raw, primal sound of anguish, and tried to surge forward, but Daniel caught her, his grip firm yet gentle. "Wait, sweetheart, let me check first." He swiftly handed Lily to his assistant, his gaze fixed on Grace, and rushed to her side. He pressed his fingers to her neck, searching, praying for a pulse. "There," he breathed out, a wave of profound relief washing over him. "Faint, but there, she's alive." He looked up at his assistant, his eyes sharp. "Call an ambulance, now." But even as the words left his lips, he knew it would be an eternity. The roads were treacherous, a sheet of ice, traffic a gridlocked nightmare. "No," he said, his voice decisive, scooping Grace's too light body into his arms. She was alarmingly weightless. "She's too light, we're taking her ourselves." They rushed back to the waiting SUV, Daniel cradling Grace's fragile form. He laid her gently across the spacious back seat, her head resting carefully in his lap. Lily, her little face streaked with tears, sat beside them, clutching her mother's hand. "Mama, wake up," she pleaded, her voice a heart-wrenching whisper. "Please wake up." Daniel's driver, a man usually unflappable, sped through the treacherous streets as fast as he dared, every red light a torturous eternity, every careful turn feeling agonizingly slow. Daniel looked down at Grace, truly seeing her for the first time beyond a name on a payroll. She was young, perhaps in her early 30s, her face etched with a weariness that belied her years. Her hair, tied back in a messy ponytail, clung to her damp forehead. Her hands, resting in Lily's small grasp, were rough, calloused, the unmistakable marks of relentless, physical labor. This was someone's mother, someone's entire world, and she had collapsed from sheer exhaustion, utterly unnoticed, in a building that bore his name. "How long has she been working for us?" Daniel demanded of his assistant, who was already on the phone with the HR department, her voice a hushed murmur. "Records show 3 years, sir," the assistant reported back, her voice tinged with a new solemnity. "She's been picking up extra shifts for the past 4 months, sometimes 12, 14 hours in a row." Daniel closed his eyes, a sharp stab of understanding, and guilt, piercing him. "Why?" Her file, a cold clinical document, provided the devastating answer. Asterisk single mother, sole income, no benefits, no health insurance, no sick days. Asterisk just an endless, relentless cycle of work, month after month, year after year, all to keep a fragile roof over her daughter's head. Upon their arrival at the hospital, the carefully controlled chaos of the emergency room enveloped them in a blur. Doctors, a flurry of crisp white coats, rushed forward. Grace was swiftly transferred onto a stretcher, disappearing amidst the rhythmic beeping of machines and the urgent cries of medical jargon Daniel couldn't comprehend. He stood rooted in the bustling hallway, Lily's small, trembling hand clutched tightly in his, feeling utterly helpless, profoundly out of his depth. An hour later, a doctor, a woman with tired but calm eyes, emerged. "She's stable," the doctor announced, her voice a bomb, but it was incredibly close. "Severe dehydration, extreme exhaustion, critically low blood sugar. Her body simply gave out. Another hour, perhaps even less, and we might have been looking at organ failure." Daniel felt a wave of nausea wash over him, a sickening lurch in his gut. "Will she be okay?" "With proper rest and care, yes, she will," the doctor confirmed, her gaze steady. "But she absolutely cannot continue working like this. Her body simply cannot take it anymore." Lily tugged on Daniel's sleeve, her eyes wide with a fragile hope. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded gently. "She's sleeping soundly now, but yes, come with me." They walked into a quiet, dimly lit room where Grace lay in the hospital bed, a delicate network of IVs and monitors connecting her to life. She looked peaceful now, devoid of the frantic energy that had defined her, but also heartbreakingly fragile. Lily climbed onto the chair beside the bed, her small hand reaching out to clasp her mother's. "I found you, Mama," she whispered, a fierce, unwavering love in her voice. "I found you." Daniel stood at the foot of the bed, a silent sentinel, watching the tender reunion. Mother and daughter, together again, a poignant tableau. And in that moment, a profound, unshakable decision crystallized within him. This would never ever happen again. Not in his company, not on his watch, not to anyone under his purview. He pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen, composing an urgent email to his entire leadership team. "Effective immediately," he typed, his conviction echoing in every word. "We are changing everything, because some things matter more than profit margins. Some things matter more than quarterly efficiency reports. People matter. Mothers matter. Little girls who brave blizzards to find their loved ones matter. And it is high time I started acting like it." Grace slowly stirred, her consciousness drifting back to the persistent, steady rhythm of beeping. Her eyelids fluttered open, her vision hazy, and for a disoriented moment, she had no idea where she was. White walls, blindingly bright fluorescent lights, the sterile antiseptic smell that clung to the air, all unfamiliar. Then she saw Lily. Her daughter was curled up in a hospital chair beside the bed, deeply asleep, still clutching her beloved worn stuffed rabbit. And sitting quietly in another chair across the room was a man she had never seen before. Tall, with dark hair subtly touched with gray at the temples, dressed in an expensive-looking sweater and jeans, he exuded an aura of calm authority. Grace instinctively tried to sit up, a sudden wave of panic flooding through her. "Lily, she's safe," the man said quickly, rising from his chair, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. "She's right here. You're both safe." Grace's head spun violently, the room tilting. Where am I?" "Seattle General," he replied, his gaze steady. "You collapsed at work. You've been unconscious for about 6 hours. Asterisk work." Asterisk the word hit her with the visceral force of a physical blow, stripping away any lingering fogginess. "Oh no, I have to go back. They'll fire me. I can't lose this job." She tried to swing her legs over the side of the bed, but the room reeled, threatening to consume her. The man moved swiftly, gently pressing her shoulder, coaxing her back down. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice firm but undeniably kind. And no one's firing you. Please just rest. Grace looked at him, truly saw him for the first time. There was something in his eyes, a depth she hadn't expected, genuine concern, unfeigned and potent. Who are you? She whispered, her voice hoarse. My name is Daniel Rivers, he responded, his tone even. I own the company that contracts your cleaning service. Grace's stomach plummeted. A sickening lurch. Asterisk the owner? Asterisk she was talking to the owner of the whole massive corporation. I'm so sorry, sir, she stammered, shame burning her cheeks. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I've been trying to pick up extra shifts because they cut my hours last month. And rent was due, and Lily needed new shoes. Her voice cracked, finally breaking under the weight of her accumulated stress. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, spilled down her pale cheeks. I'm a single mom, sir. I can't afford to lose any work. I was so tired. I thought I could push through one more night. Daniel pulled his chair closer to the bed. The soft scrape of its legs against the floor the only sound in the quiet room. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly low, almost reflective. How long have you been working like this, Grace? For months, she admitted, a bitter, weary resignation in her tone. Sometimes 70, 80 hours a week, with no breaks. Grace let out a humorless, almost cynical laugh. Breaks are for people with benefits, sir. I'm contracted. No benefits, no sick days. I get paid by the hour, so if I stop, I don't eat. Lily doesn't eat. Daniel fell silent for a long, heavy moment, the weight of her words settling over him. Then he uttered something that truly astonished her. I'm sorry. Grace blinked, her tear-filled eyes wide with confusion. What? I'm sorry, Daniel repeated, his voice imbued with a raw sincerity. This is my company. These are my buildings. And I had no idea people were working themselves to death just to survive. That's on me, Grace. It's not your fault. Yes, it is, Daniel insisted, his voice now gaining strength, conviction hardening its edges. I built a company so utterly consumed by efficiency and profit margins that I utterly forgot about the most fundamental element. The people who make it all possible. People like you, Grace. He stood up, walking to the window and gazing out at the snow-laden city, a distant, glittering landscape. Your daughter, he continued, his voice softer, weighted with emotion. Walked 3 miles through that blizzard this morning, looking for you. Did you know that? Grace's hand flew to her mouth, a gasp catching in her throat, a wave of maternal terror washing over her. Oh my God, Lily, she's okay? She's more than okay. She made it all the way to my house. That's how I found out about you. Grace looked over at her sleeping daughter, her heart overflowing with a complex mix of love, guilt, and fierce pride. Lily's face was peaceful now, finally at rest, but Grace could clearly discern the faint, dark circles under her eyes. A silent testament to the exhausting ordeal her brave, beautiful baby girl had endured. I don't know what to say, Grace whispered, tears threatening to spill again. Daniel turned back to her, his gaze steady, unwavering. You don't have to say anything, Grace, but I want you to listen to me now. Things are going to change. I'm already making calls, initiating new policies. We're implementing better pay for contract workers, comprehensive health benefits, strict limits on consecutive working hours. No one, absolutely no one, should ever have to choose between their own health and feeding their child. Grace stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile his words with her lived reality, afraid to believe such a miracle. Why would you do that? She asked, her voice hushed with disbelief. Because it's the right thing to do, Daniel answered simply, profoundly. And because, he paused, his gaze drifting towards the sleeping Lily. Because that little girl reminded me what truly matters in life. Not quarterly reports, not fluctuating stock prices, not market dominance. People, families, connection. Over the following whirlwind of days, events unfolded at a pace Grace could barely comprehend. She was instructed to rest, to focus solely on her recovery. Her daunting hospital bills were completely covered. Her apartment rent, a monthly source of dread, was paid for the next 3 months. And then came the most astonishing offer of all. Daniel's assistant visited her hospital room, a slim folder in her hand. Inside, Grace found a job offer, not as a cleaner, but as an administrative assistant at the company's main downtown office. The terms were almost unbelievable. Better regular hours, triple her previous pay, and full comprehensive benefits. This has to be a mistake, Grace stammered, staring at the papers, her hands trembling. No mistake at all, the assistant replied with a warm, genuine smile. Mr. Rivers was very specific about this. When Grace was finally discharged from the hospital, it was Daniel himself who came to pick them up. He drove them home, not to some impersonal hotel, but to their own small apartment in the Georgetown neighborhood. It wasn't much, just 2 humble rooms, paint peeling in places, a radiator that clanked a weary rhythm. But it was theirs, a sanctuary. This is where we live, Lily declared proudly, taking Daniel's hand, her small fingers warm in his, and leading him inside. Want to see my drawings? Daniel smiled, a genuine, unforced expression. I'd love to, Lily. While Lily enthusiastically showed him her artwork, a vibrant collection stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, Grace, her hand still trembling slightly, made tea. This man, this immensely wealthy, undeniably powerful man, was sitting on her worn-out couch, surrounded by the humble clutter of their lives, genuinely admiring her daughter's crayon drawings. This one's really good, Daniel observed, pointing to a colorful picture of a rainbow, a small smile playing on his lips. You're quite the artist, Lily. Lily beamed, her face alight with pride. Mama says I can be anything I want when I grow up. Your mama's right, Daniel affirmed, his gaze meeting Grace's for a fleeting moment. Grace brought the steaming mugs of tea over and sank onto the couch beside him. For a moment, a comfortable silence settled over the small apartment, broken only by the gentle clanking of the old radiator. Just the 3 of them, nestled within those 4 walls with their cracked ceiling and drafty windows. Why are you really doing all this, Daniel? Grace asked softly, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes searching his. People like you don't usually notice people like me. Daniel set his cup down, his gaze thoughtful. You want the honest truth, Grace? He paused, gathering his thoughts. I was lonely, profoundly lonely. I had everything the world defined as success. Money, power, a big empty house on a hill. But I didn't have connection. I didn't have a purpose that extended beyond the next deal, the next product launch. And then Lily knocked on my gate, and suddenly, everything felt real again. He looked directly at Grace, and a moment of quiet understanding, a recognition of shared vulnerability, passed between them. You too, he said, his voice soft but resonant. You reminded me what life is actually supposed to be about. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, a quiet, gentle descent. But inside that small, unassuming apartment, something warm, tender, and undeniably hopeful was beginning to blossom. Over the ensuing weeks, A quiet, profound transformation began to unfold, far exceeding Grace's wildest expectations. She started her new job at the downtown office, a world away from the anonymity of night shifts. And with Lily happily settled into a vibrant after-school program nearby, their lives began to settle into a rhythm, a far more harmonious, secure rhythm than Grace had known in years. But the most surprising development of all was Daniel. He didn't simply disappear once his good deed was done. Quite the contrary, he showed up, often. At first, his visits were ostensibly professional. He would check in, genuinely curious about how Grace was adjusting to her new role. She worked in the operations department now, coordinating complex schedules and managing critical communications. And she was remarkably good at it. Years of meticulously juggling multiple cleaning shifts, of organizing her life down to the minute, had inadvertently honed her into an incredibly organized, efficient individual. You have a real gift for this, Grace. Her supervisor had told her one day, a genuine compliment in his voice. Have you ever thought about management training? Grace had merely laughed, a light, almost disbelieving sound. Asterisk management? Asterisk that was for other people, for those with degrees and connections, not for someone who had barely finished high school. But her supervisor, she realized, had been entirely serious. Then, subtly, imperceptibly at first, Daniel began to show up for different reasons that transcended professional oversight. He'd occasionally stop by Grace's desk with a steaming cup of coffee. I noticed you like vanilla lattes, he'd say casually, as if it were the most unremarkable observation, an everyday occurrence. But it was something. It meant he'd been paying attention, truly paying attention. When Lily's after-school program hosted its annual holiday party, Daniel, to Grace's astonishment, asked if he could attend. You don't have to, Daniel, Grace had quickly replied, her cheeks warming. I know you're incredibly busy. I'd like to, he said simply, his gaze earnest. If that's okay. So he came. He gamely squeezed himself into a ridiculously tiny chair designed for children, nibbled on cookies shaped like snowmen, and helped Lily construct a gingerbread house that, almost immediately, spectacularly collapsed. They laughed, the sound so unrestrained, so genuine, that other parents turned to look, drawn by the infectious joy. One of the other mothers, leaning conspiratorially towards Grace, remarked, Your husband is wonderful with her. Grace started to correct her, the words catching in her throat, because the undeniable truth was that Daniel was wonderful with Lily, and Lily, in turn, adored him without reservation. She had, over the weeks, transitioned from calling him Mr. Daniel to simply Daniel. And then, one day, Grace overheard her telling another child at the program, with quiet pride, That's my friend. He saved me from the snow. But it wasn't just about Lily anymore. Grace found herself, to her own surprise, eagerly anticipating Daniel's visits, too. She cherished the way he listened when she spoke. Really listened. As if her words, her thoughts truly mattered. The way he would solicit her opinion on complex work matters. And then, astoundingly, actually implement her suggestions. And the way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. A quiet intensity in his gaze that sent a shiver down her spine. One evening, after a particularly long and draining day, Daniel offered to drive them home. It was raining, a relentless Seattle downpour, and Grace had been dreading the crowded, impersonal bus ride. Are you sure? She asked, a flicker of hesitation in her voice. Grace, I'm sure, he replied, his tone gentle but firm. In the quiet sanctity of the car, Lily drifted off to sleep in the back seat, her arms wrapped tightly around her rabbit, a picture of childlike contentment. Daniel drove carefully through the slick, wet streets, the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers a comforting, steady beat. Can I ask you something? Grace said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Anything, Daniel responded, his eyes on the road. Why don't you have a family, Daniel? She ventured, a boldness born of newfound comfort. I mean, you're so successful and kind, and incredibly smart. I'm surprised you're not married. Daniel was silent for a long moment, the quiet hum of the engine filling the space between them. I was engaged once, about 10 years ago. He finally confessed, his voice tinged with a faint melancholy. But she said I was married to my work, and she was right. I chose the company over her, over everything else that truly mattered. After that, I just threw myself even deeper into building the business. It was easier than dealing with what I'd lost, easier than confronting the emptiness. Do you regret it? Grace asked, her voice soft with empathy. Every day, he admitted, a quick, almost imperceptible glance in her direction. Until recently, the car, with its gentle warmth and shared vulnerability, suddenly felt smaller, more intimate. Grace, I need to tell you something, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone, as they pulled up to her small building. This you and Lily, this isn't charity for me. It stopped being that the moment I met you. You've changed my life, Grace. Both of you have. And I know there's a power imbalance here, and I absolutely don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I just need you to know how I feel. I know, Grace said softly, her heart aching with a truth she'd been carrying for weeks. She reached over, her hand gently touching his, a spark of connection passing between them. I feel it too. Their eyes met, a profound, wordless communication passing between them. And for the first time in years, Grace felt something she thought had been forever extinguished within her. Hope, not just for survival, but for genuine, radiant happiness. The true turning point, the moment everything irrevocably shifted, came on a crisp Saturday in late January. Daniel had invited Grace and Lily to his house for dinner. Grace had been there before, of course, but always briefly, always within the confines of professional interactions or urgent crisis. This time, it felt profoundly different, imbued with an intimacy she hadn't dared to imagine. He had cooked, actually cooked, a simple but heartfelt meal of spaghetti with homemade sauce, crusty garlic bread, and a fresh salad. It wasn't gourmet, not a Michelin-starred dish, but it was prepared with an unmistakable care, a personal touch that transcended its humble ingredients. After dinner, they settled comfortably by the roaring fireplace, its warmth chasing away the winter chill. Lily, ever the curious explorer, had discovered Daniel's extensive collection of old vinyl records, and was now spinning in delighted circles to the joyous strains of jazz music. Grace and Daniel sat on the floor, their backs leaning against the plush couch, simply watching her, a quiet contentment settling between them. She's happy, Grace observed, a soft smile gracing her lips, her gaze fixed on her daughter. I haven't seen her this carefree in, I can't even remember how long. You're happy too, Grace? Daniel noted, his voice gentle. I can tell. Grace looked at him, her eyes shining. I am. For the first time in forever, Daniel, I'm not just surviving. I'm actually living, and that's because of you. No, Daniel countered, shaking his head gently. It's because of you, Grace. Your strength, your incredible courage, your refusal to give up even when everything was falling apart around you. You did that. I opened a door. You opened more than a door, Daniel. Grace insisted, her voice resonating with conviction. He turned to face her fully, his gaze intense, serious. Grace, I need to be truly honest with you. I'm falling in love with you, with both of you. And I know it might seem utterly insane, considering the short time we've known each other, but I have never, not once in my entire life, felt such absolute certainty about anything. Grace's breath hitched, a gasp trapped in her throat. The suddenness, the raw vulnerability in his eyes, stole her voice. Grace, you don't have to say anything right now, he quickly added, seeing the shock on her face, a wave of apprehension washing over him. I just needed you to know. No pressure, no expectations. I couldn't keep it bottled up inside anymore. Grace's gaze softened as she truly saw him, this remarkable man who had, with a single act of selfless generosity, saved her daughter from the bitter cold and, in doing so, irrevocably changed her own life. He had illuminated for her what genuine kindness looked like, a warmth that wasn't calculated or transactional, but simply given. I'm falling in love with you, too, she whispered, the words barely audible, yet brimming with a profound truth she hadn't dared to voice until now. In that magical moment, with Lily's joyful, uninhibited dancing providing a whimsical backdrop and the cozy fire crackling a rhythmic symphony beside them, Daniel leaned in. His kiss was soft, deliberate, full of a tender promise that resonated deep within Grace's soul. It was a kiss that tasted a future of belonging. When they finally gently pulled apart, Lily had ceased her impromptu ballet, her wide, curious eyes fixed on them. A small, innocent frown creased her brow. Does this mean Daniel can be my daddy? She asked, her voice a sweet, hopeful chime. Both adults dissolved into soft laughter, a mix of relief and profound emotion. Grace pulled her daughter close, enveloping her in a warm hug. We'll definitely talk about that, baby, she murmured, pressing a kiss to Lily's hair. But yes, maybe someday. Daniel, his heart overflowing, wrapped his strong arms around both of them. In that embrace, for the very first time in his 41 years, his once grand, often echoing empty house finally felt like a true home, filled with warmth, laughter, and the undeniable presence of love. 3 months later, the lingering chill of winter had finally yielded to the gentle embrace of spring. The last stubborn patches of snow dissolved into glittering puddles, and vibrant cherry blossoms unfurled like delicate pink clouds along the bustling, rain-kissed streets of Seattle. In that relatively short span of time, their lives had undergone a profound and undeniably beautiful metamorphosis. Grace, once overwhelmed and struggling, had found a new footing, moving gracefully into a senior coordinator role at her job. She wasn't just working. She was thriving, discovering strengths and capabilities she never knew she possessed. Lily, too, blossomed. She was now enrolled in a wonderful new school, a vibrant hub rich with engaging art programs and inspiring music classes. Her days were filled with the joy of making new friends, her laughter echoing more freely, her spirit growing bolder and brighter. And Daniel? He was a different man altogether, a transformation so palpable that even the usually oblivious staff at his company had taken notice. His once stern countenance now frequently softened into genuine smiles. He no longer walked through the offices seeing only departments. He saw people remembering their names, not just those of his executives. Driven by a newfound empathy and understanding, he'd implemented sweeping, progressive changes to how contract workers were treated, ensuring better pay, comprehensive benefits, and crucial protections. His leadership in ethical practices began to set a new standard, with other companies across Seattle subtly, then openly starting to follow his enlightened lead. Yet, the most significant change remained largely invisible to the outside world. It was an internal awakening, a profound shift in his very core. Daniel had truly come alive again, shedding the isolating armor of self-definition through work and embracing a life defined by meaningful relationships. He and Grace shared their days, seeing each other almost every single day now. Sometimes, their moments were beautifully simple. A quiet coffee before the city awoke, a shared lunch amidst the dappled sunlight of a park, or a cozy dinner at one of their places. Other times, their adventures were more significant, weaving a rich tapestry of shared memories. Spontaneous weekend trips to the majestic mountains, teaching Lily the simple, timeless joy of skipping stones across the vast expanse of a beach, or cherished family movie nights, complete with popcorn and whispered jokes. Yes, family. That's precisely what they had, against all odds, undeniably become. One ethereal evening in early April, Daniel arranged a clandestine meeting, asking Grace to join him at a place he simply called special. He picked her up just as the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in fiery hues, while Lily, buzzing with the knowledge of a secret, happily stayed behind with his housekeeper, who had, over time, become a beloved, grandmotherly figure in her young life. Where exactly are we going? Grace asked, a playful curiosity lacing her voice as they drove. Daniel just smiled, a hint of something profound in his eyes. You'll see. He drove them to Cary Park, a renowned small overlook perched high above the city, famous for its breathtaking, panoramic vistas. Below them, the glittering tapestry of the city skyline spread out, punctuated by the iconic Space Needle reaching skyward, and in the majestic distance, the snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier glowed ethereal in the fading light. The heavens above were a masterpiece, swirled in vibrant shades of fuchsia, rose gold, and soft lavender. They stood at the weathered railing, their fingers brushing as they gazed out over the sprawling metropolis, the very city where, on a cold, snowy morning just months ago, their lives had so unexpectedly, yet perfectly collided. This is where I used to come, Daniel confessed quietly, his voice imbued with a newfound tenderness. When I felt utterly lost, adrift, I'd stand here, looking at all these magnificent buildings, all this success I'd meticulously built, and yet I'd feel nothing, just an echoing emptiness. He turned, his gaze anchoring on hers, full of an raw, honest emotion. Grace, 3 short months ago, a courageous little girl knocked on my gate in the snow, and in my arrogance, I truly believed I was saving her. But the profound truth is, you too saved me. You gave me purpose again, a reason to wake up each day. You infused my life with unbridled joy. You gave me a reason, the most beautiful reason, to come home every single night. Grace's eyes, already glistening, brimmed over, tears welling and threatening to spill. Daniel, let me finish, he said softly, a gentle, understanding smile playing on his lips. Please. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, his hand emerging with a small, velvet-covered box. Grace's hand flew to her mouth, a silent, joyful gasp escaping her lips. I know this might seem incredibly fast to some people, Daniel continued, his voice steady yet filled with deep emotion as he slowly dropped to one knee, the world around them seemingly fading into a soft blur. But I have never, not once, been more utterly certain of anything in my entire existence. You, Grace, are the strongest, the most compassionate, the most profoundly incredible woman I have ever had the privilege of meeting. And Lily is quite simply the radiant light of my life. I want to be there for both of you, not merely as a helpful friend or temporary companion, but as family, a real forever family. He carefully, deliberately, opened the box. Nestled within was a ring of exquisite simplicity and timeless elegance. A gleaming silver band cradling a single, brilliant diamond, sparkling with a promise of forever. Grace Bennett, he whispered, his voice thick with hope and love. Will you marry me? Will you and Lily? Will you let me love you both, truly and completely, for the rest of my life? Tears, warm and joyful, streamed freely down Grace's face, blurring the magnificent skyline behind him. She tried to speak, but no words would come, so she simply nodded, again and again, a silent emphatic yes as laughter mingled with her tears. Yes, she finally managed, the single word a burst of pure elation. Yes, Daniel, 1,000 times yes. With a relieved, triumphant smile, he slid the ring onto her finger, its cool metal a tangible symbol of their new beginning. Then he stood, pulling her gently, possessively, into his arms. They held each other tightly as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the entire world in the soft, magical glow of twilight. I love you, Grace whispered against his chest, her heart soaring. I love you too, Daniel replied, his voice husky with emotion. Both of you, so very, very much. When they returned to Daniel's magnificent house, the front door barely closing behind them before they were met by a whirlwind of small, bouncing energy. Lily was practically vibrating with barely contained excitement in the living room, her eyes wide with a triumphant gleam. Did you ask her? She practically demanded, launching herself forward the instant they stepped inside. Did she say yes? Grace chuckled, a warm wave of joy washing over her. You knew? Daniel told me last week, Lily chirped, now a blur of motion as she ran over and wrapped her small arms around both of them in a fierce, joyful hug. He asked if it was okay, and I said, yes, Mama. I said, yes, because I want Daniel to be my daddy for real. Grace knelt down, bringing herself to her daughter's level, her heart swelling with an emotion too vast for words. Are you absolutely sure, baby? She asked softly, looking into those earnest, unblinking eyes. This is a big change, a forever kind of change. Lily nodded with a solemn, unwavering certainty that belied her years. He saved us, Mama, she declared, her voice filled with an innocent, profound wisdom. And now we get to keep him forever. Daniel, his own eyes moist with unshed tears, crouched down beside them, completing their small, perfect circle. The three of them held each other tightly, a sacred, unbreakable embrace of love and belonging that filled every corner of that once grand, now finally full house. The wedding, held a few months later as spring reached its verdant peak, was intimate and beautifully simple. It was a celebration shared only with their closest friends, a select few trusted coworkers, and the precious people who mattered most in their newly forged lives. They chose a charming botanical garden as their venue, a tranquil oasis bursting with vibrant blooms and the sweet perfume of new growth. Lily, resplendent in a sunny yellow dress that perfectly mirrored her radiant spirit, walked down the flower-strewn aisle with an air of immense pride, her small face alight with joy as she scattered petals. She truly looked like a ray of pure sunshine. When Daniel and Grace stood before their loved ones, exchanging their heartfelt vows, there wasn't a single dry eye among the gathered crowd. You walked into my life in a literal storm, Daniel declared, his voice thick with an emotion so profound it choked him for a moment. A blizzard that promised only cold and isolation. But instead, you became my shelter, my unwavering sanctuary. You became my home, my anchor, my everything. Grace, tears streaming freely down her radiant face, met his gaze with an equal depth of feeling. You saw me, Daniel, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. When I felt utterly invisible, lost in the shadows of my struggles, you gave me hope when all hope seemed extinguished. You gave my daughter a father she adored, a steadfast presence. You gave us a future, a life I never dared to dream was possible. As they were finally pronounced husband and wife, a wave of palpable emotion washed over everyone. Lily, unable to contain her boundless joy, promptly abandoned her spot and launched herself at them, wrapping her arms around their legs. We're a real family now, she shouted, her small voice echoing with pure, unadulterated happiness. And indeed they were. Later that evening, as the last echoes of laughter faded and the final guests departed, the three of them settled into the comfortable embrace of their living room. A living room that was now unequivocally their living room, in their home. Lily, utterly exhausted but blissfully content, was already succumbing to sleep on the plush couch nestled between them, her small hand clutching her beloved stuffed rabbit. Do you remember that morning? Grace asked Daniel softly, her voice a tender whisper in the quiet, the memory vivid in her mind. When Lily, small and shivering, knocked on your gate? Every single detail, he affirmed, his voice resonant with emotion. I remember thinking my life was perfect, before that day. Successful, meticulously organized, complete. But I was so profoundly, utterly wrong. And what is it now? Grace prompted, her gaze searching his, filled with an enduring love. Daniel looked from his beautiful wife to his peacefully sleeping daughter. At this family he never knew he was so desperately missing, a void he hadn't even recognized. A gentle, knowing smile touched his lips. Now, he breathed, his voice thick with gratitude and wonder. Now it's full, finally wonderfully, gloriously full. Outside, a soft, gentle rain began to fall, pattering softly against the windows. It wasn't the tumultuous, isolating storm that had first brought them together, but a delicate, steady rain. A nurturing benediction that nourished the earth and allowed things to grow, to truly flourish. And inside, three souls who had, against all odds, found each other in the biting snow, sat together in the encompassing warmth of their shared love. No longer alone, no longer adrift, no longer afraid. They were home, the end. Sometimes, the most extraordinary and life-altering gifts come unexpectedly, wrapped not in ribbons and bows, but in the heart of the coldest, most formidable storms. Sometimes, a single, unassuming act of pure kindness possesses the power to dismantle old worlds and rebuild entirely new ones, changing everything in its wake. And sometimes, when we courageously open our hearts and extend a helping hand to others, we discover, in the most profound way, that we were actually the ones who needed saving all along. Thank you for journeying with us through the story. If it resonated within your heart, please share it, for there is always someone who needs to hear its hopeful whisper.